She was America's angel, the voice of innocence, the radiant smile that seemed untouchable. But behind that perfect grin was a truth so dark it could break you. Marie Osmond, adored by millions, yet abandoned in silence. Forced to sing before she could speak, praised for every smile, punished for every tear. She was never just a child, she was a brand. And that brand came at a devastating cost. This isn't just the rise and fall of a star, it's the story of a woman who lost everything: her childhood, her freedom, and eventually, her son, yet still dared to smile for a world that never saw her pain. Marie Osmond wasn't simply born into a large family, she was born into obligation. While most little girls clutched teddy bears and played in the backyard, Marie was handed a microphone. At just 3 years old, she was pushed into the spotlight, rehearsing songs and smiling on command. Childhood wasn't something she grew out of. It was something taken from her before she ever had the chance to live it. She wasn't raised, she was rehearsed. The only girl among 9 siblings, Marie was treated as the crown jewel of the Osmond dynasty, the child who would shine brightest in a carefully manufactured family brand, but that shine came at a price. While other children scraped their knees playing tag or laughed riding bikes, Marie memorized lines and perfected harmonies. There was no freedom, no innocence, only production and perfection. And when she dared to ask for the simple joy of playing outside, her mother's answer cut like ice: "No, you have work to do." Later in life, Marie would look back and confess, "I felt more like a product than a child." That wasn't a metaphor. It was her reality. Her worth wasn't measured in love or affection, but in applause and output. Every note she sang, every smile she forced, was another brick in a cage she never asked to enter. By the time she was old enough to realize what she was missing, it was already too late. The games, the laughter, the carefree joy of childhood, all of it had been traded away for a spotlight she never chose. At just 11 years old, Marie should have been safe at home, surrounded by dolls and school books. Instead, she was sent halfway across the world for what was supposed to be a thrilling commercial shoot in Japan. But the dream turned into a nightmare that nearly ended her young life. The boat she boarded capsized without warning. In an instant, the cameras, the crew, the illusion of safety disappeared, leaving Marie adrift in shark-infested waters. The sun scorched her skin. Salt water burned her throat. Terrified, dehydrated, blistered, she floated alone, a child staring into the abyss. Most children would have been rescued and rushed home, wrapped in blankets, comforted by the arms of a mother. But Marie wasn't most children. Instead of healing, she was dragged straight back into the recording studio. New questions asked, no space to cry, no comfort for the trauma she had endured. She later remembered, "I was covered in burns, but they told me to smile and sing." That wasn't just show business. It was cruelty dressed in glitter and costumes. It was the price of fame, extracted from a child too young to even understand the transaction. The world applauded her resilience, but the truth was darker. Marie was being conditioned to silence her pain, to bury her fear, and to wear a smile, no matter how broken she felt inside. What should have been a warning to her family and management became just another chapter of sacrifice. And Marie paid not in money, but in scars, in silence, and in smiles that were never truly hers. Marie Osmond was not raised in a home filled with warmth and freedom. She was raised in what felt like a factory of perfection. Her parents, devout Mormons, didn't just encourage excellence, they demanded it. Every Osmond child was pushed to the brink, drilled like soldiers in a relentless army of entertainment. Music, rehearsals, memorized routines. It wasn't a hobby. It was law. Instruments had to be mastered, harmony perfected, dance steps sharpened until every move was flawless. If one child stumbled, another corrected. The siblings weren't just brothers and sisters, they were each other's trainers, taskmasters, and competitors. For Marie, the pressure was doubled. She wasn't only part of the group, she was its shining jewel, the sole daughter, the face the world saw as the embodiment of purity and charm. But behind that polished image was a girl suffocating. She remembered once pleading to play outside, to simply run in the grass like any child her age. Her mother's reply was chilling in its bluntness. "No, you have work to do." It wasn't a suggestion. It was her life sentence. Her name became a brand. Her existence became a performance, and her feelings, sadness, exhaustion, longing, were irrelevant. She later confessed with haunting honesty, "I wasn't living. I was functioning." The truth was undeniable. It wasn't love that shaped her childhood, but control. Every smile, every note, every carefully choreographed movement was proof that she was valuable only as long as she produced perfection. And in that controlled silence, a dangerous seed was planted, one that would follow her into adolescence and nearly destroy her. At just 15 years old, Marie Osmond's face was everywhere. She was the glowing image of youth, standing beside her brother Donnie on the Donnie and Marie show. A teen idol adored by millions. A picture-perfect star America thought they knew. But behind the sparkling sets and radiant costumes, Marie felt like a child playing dress-up, trapped in a role she didn't believe belonged to her. That illusion shattered the day studio executives delivered a brutal ultimatum: lose 10 pounds or risk losing everything. She was already just 103 pounds delicate, almost fragile, but the demand cut deeper than flesh. It was a sentence, a command that told her she wasn't good enough unless she shrank herself even further. Obedient, desperate to survive. Marie obeyed. She starved her body down to 93 pounds. She lived not on food but on punishment, a concoction of lemon juice, cayenne pepper, and maple syrup. Not a diet, but a form of slow destruction disguised as discipline. Costumes that should have celebrated her youth became cages. Each fitting was a reminder that her worth was measured in inches and ounces, not in talent or heart. She began fasting for days, pushing her body past the edge of exhaustion just to keep the cameras rolling. Control turned into obsession. Obsession turned into illness. Anorexia, bulimia, silence. These became the shadows she carried. Long before the world even dared to speak the words out loud, they called me an embarrassment. She later admitted, her voice trembling, "At 103 pounds, I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to feel." Her perfect smile became a mask, one that hid a body screaming for kindness and a soul suffocating under the weight of perfection. And while the audience cheered, Marie was disappearing piece by piece, pound by pound, punished for daring to be human. Long before Hollywood's impossible standards carved scars into Marie Osmond's body, something even darker had already taken root. It wasn't about weight or fame, it was about survival in a world that had betrayed her innocence. In a trembling voice, years later, on national television, Marie revealed a truth she had buried for decades as a child. She had been physically abused. The confession stunned her fans. But for Marie, it wasn't shock, it was memory. She had carried that shadow silently, believing for so long that the pain was hers to bear alone. "I thought I was different," she admitted softly, reflecting on the times she questioned her worth, even her right to exist. These weren't just bruises on her skin, they were wounds in her spirit. They whispered lies that settled deep inside her, that love had to be earned, that approval was conditional, that suffering was simply normal. Every forced smile, every punishing diet, every desperate attempt at control could be traced back to this truth. A childhood not only stolen, but violated. And yet, she never told. She never screamed. She never demanded justice. Because, like so many little girls raised in silence, she was taught that her pain didn't matter. She was taught to smile through suffering, to keep her secrets hidden so that no one else would feel uncomfortable. So Marie carried those wounds forward into her adolescence, into her career, into every relationship. They shaped the way she saw herself and the way she believed others saw her. The applause grew louder, but inside she grew smaller, swallowed by shame that wasn't hers to hold. Behind every flawless performance, there was a girl still waiting to be rescued. As the Donnie and Marie show dominated prime time, the world saw a radiant teenager with a flawless smile. But off-camera, Marie was unraveling. Every laugh was scripted. Every outfit a disguise. Every compliment a reminder that nobody truly knew her. Inside, she longed desperately for something real: love without conditions, tenderness without applause. She reached for it, again and again. With Michael McDonald, she was drawn to his calm spirit, his grounding presence. But their paths only brushed and never truly crossed. With Andy Gibb, the connection felt almost innocent, a sweetness that seemed like it could blossom, but his demons with addiction stole him away before love had a chance to root. Then came David Cassidy. On paper, they were perfect, two icons, young, beautiful, adored. In reality, it was chaos, two stars spinning too fast in opposite directions, crashing into each other and pulling apart just as quickly. And so, at 22, Marie thought marriage might be her salvation. With Steve Craig, her first husband, she believed stability was finally within reach. A son was born, and for a fleeting moment, she felt the warmth of a safe harbor. But 3 years later, it all crumbled. The marriage collapsed under the weight of expectations and unspoken pain. I felt like I failed, Marie later confessed. Not just as a wife, but as a mother, the deepest wound of all. Still searching, she tried again. In 1986, she married Brian Blozell. And for over 2 decades, they raised a blended family of 8 children. To the world, it looked like she had finally found her haven, a bustling home, a loyal husband, and the image of harmony. But inside those walls, the cracks widened. There was love, yes, but there was also silence, distance, and the exhaustion of trying to hold it all together. I was tired of pretending everything was okay, she admitted years later, but it wasn't. The truth was uglier. She was juggling a demanding career, 8 children, and a marriage quietly dissolving into heartbreak. There were no explosive scandals, no public fights, just years of fading connection until crease. By 2007, it ended not with rage, but with weary surrender. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the death of a dream she had clung to for decades, the dream that someone would finally see her, not as a star, not as a brand, but as Marie, the woman who had always longed for unconditional love. By 1999, after the birth of her 7th child, Marie's body kept moving, but her spirit felt as though it had shut down. She wasn't just tired, she was unraveling from the inside. I couldn't function, she later revealed. My body ached, my arms wouldn't move, and my thoughts terrified me. What many dismissed as the baby blues was, in reality, something far darker: postpartum depression that dragged her into a pit where light could no longer reach. One afternoon, unable to bear the weight, she quietly left her home. She left her children with a sitter and simply drove. Without a plan, without a destination, without certainty that she would ever come back. For hours, the road stretched endlessly before her, mirroring the emptiness she felt inside. When she finally returned, the diagnosis came clinical depression. But the label didn't ease the wound. This wasn't just a medical condition, it was the collapse of a woman who had endured fame, shame, relentless pressure, and heartbreak. This time, it broke something deeper, leaving cracks she wasn't sure she could repair. In 2006, her struggles exploded into headlines. Rumors swirled that Marie had attempted to end her life. The tabloids were merciless, feeding on her pain, publishing half-truths, and painting her as fragile, unstable, even reckless. The reality was different. She had blacked out from a severe reaction to medication. But the world didn't wait for facts. They judged, they speculated, they condemned, already drowning. Marie now felt herself gasping for air under the crushing weight of public scrutiny. She could have lashed out, could have hidden forever. Instead, she did something braver. She spoke. She spoke for the mothers too, ashamed to ask for help. For the women crying in silence behind locked doors. For the countless souls who thought they were alone in their suffering. Yet even as she tried to raise awareness, her own body betrayed her. In 2007, while competing on Dancing with the Stars, she collapsed live on air after a samba routine. Millions watched in shock as she fainted, only to awaken, smile, and laugh it off. "I guess I sambad myself into the floor," she joked. But it wasn't funny. Not really. It was a mirror of her reality, a woman pushing herself beyond her breaking point, hiding her exhaustion behind humor, forcing a smile while her soul was still bleeding. Sometimes, the bravest thing a woman can do is show up when her spirit is shattering. Marie did that again and again, not because she was invincible, but because she had no choice. It was a cold February evening in 2010 when Marie's world shattered in a way no spotlight could ever conceal. She was preparing for another performance with Donnie, rehearsing as she always did, when she noticed a missed call from her 8-year-old son, Michael. She thought she'd call him back later, after the show, but minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Michael, it was the coroner. Michael had fallen from the 8th floor of his Los Angeles apartment building. There were no drugs in his system, no alcohol, no reckless scandal to explain it away. The report was clinical, multiple blunt traumas, but Marie knew the truth went deeper. Her son hadn't been killed by a fall. He had been taken by something far more invisible, far more merciless hopelessness. Only hours before, he had promised her that he wouldn't do anything drastic. He told her he would be okay. But depression doesn't always wear a warning sign. It hides behind two words that sound deceptively safe. "I'm fine." Later, Marie discovered his note, his final cry. In it, Michael confessed he had been bullied, that he felt unbearably alone, and, most devastating of all, that he hadn't told her the truth of how deep his pain went. "He promised me," she wept. "But I didn't know. I didn't know." The guilt buried her alive. She replayed every missed call, every smile, every silence, wondering if she could have saved him had she only seen through the mask. For days after, Marie could not eat. She could not sleep. The world blurred into endless sobs and deafening silence. And yet, astonishingly, only days after Michael's death, she returned to the stage. "The only reason I went back to work," she admitted, "I was so I wouldn't sit in a room and cry all day." Behind the makeup, beneath the lights, she was a mother, shattered into 1,000 pieces, forcing herself to breathe long enough to survive another day. On Oprah, she confessed to the darkest thoughts that followed. There were moments while driving when she asked herself, would anyone really miss me? Not because she truly wanted to die, but because the pain was so relentless, she couldn't imagine how to keep going. In 2018, years after losing Michael, Marie finally said aloud the words that so many grieving parents hide. It wasn't about dying. It was about ending the pain. A raw truth too many mothers carry, but few dare to admit. Michael's death did not just wound Marie, it rewrote her very soul. Her home became a memorial. Every corner whispered his absence. Every song carried his ghost. And still, she stood on stage, smiling through the cracks, carrying her son's memory like a scar that would never fade. As if losing her beloved son wasn't enough to hollow her soul, life continued to carve pieces out of Marie Osmond's heart, one tragedy at a time. In 2004, she lost her mother, Olive, the woman who had been her compass, her quiet anchor through every storm of fame and family. She was my guide, Marie whispered years later. Without her, I felt like a child again, wandering without direction. That loss alone would have been unbearable. But grief didn't pause. Just 3 years later, her father passed away. His steady presence, once the unshakable foundation of the Osmond family, was gone. With both parents gone, Marie felt orphaned in middle age, suddenly stripped of the people who had defined the beginning of her journey. Then came the loss of her grandchild in 2018, a heartbreak she rarely speaks of publicly. The details remained private, but her eyes in interviews carried the weight of unspeakable pain. This time it wasn't just her loss, it was watching one of her children suffer in ways she knew too well, and being powerless to protect them. In 2022, tragedy struck again when her daughter Jessica's husband was killed in senseless street violence. A young life stolen, a future erased in an instant. Marie could only watch as her daughter collapsed under the crushing weight of grief, knowing there was nothing she could do to take that pain away. And still, the blows kept coming. Her brother Verl suffered a devastating stroke, leaving him a shadow of the man he once was. Then in early 2025, the final cruel twist: her beloved brother Wayne, her partner on stage and her protector off it, passed away. Wayne's laughter had been her safe place, his presence her comfort. Losing him was like losing a part of her own soul. Each loss carved deeper lines into her heart. Each goodbye was a reminder that no matter how brightly the spotlight once burned, it could never hold back the darkness of grief. For most people, one or two of these tragedies would have been enough to break them completely. For Marie, they arrived in relentless waves. Yet through it all, she did not disappear. She stood back up, again and again. Not for fame, not for applause, but simply because survival was the only choice left. I've learned, she said quietly, that the heart can stretch farther than you think. It breaks, it bleeds, but it also holds space for healing. Her story was no longer about stardom. It was about resilience, about a woman who kept breathing through loss after loss. Even when her soul begged her to stop, after decades of heartbreak, Marie's life took an unexpected turn toward healing. Far from the chaos of Hollywood, nestled in the quiet deserts of St. George, Utah, she built a sanctuary, more than a mansion. It became a living scrapbook of grief and grace. Family photos lined the walls, handwritten lyrics filled drawers, and echoes of laughter and tears clung to every room. It was a place where Marie could finally breathe without a spotlight glaring over her shoulder. In 2011, something quietly beautiful happened, something almost no one expected. Marie remarried Steve Crage, the very man she had divorced nearly 30 years earlier. This time, it wasn't a fairy tale, not the dazzling spectacle of young love, but something deeper, kidder. wiser. Both had grown. Both had been broken. And both were finally ready for peace instead of pretense. Their wedding date was no coincidence. They chose May 4th, the birthday of both Marie's late mother, Olive, and her son, Michael. It was a way of bringing the one she had lost into the love she had finally rediscovered. "We don't need the world to validate us anymore," she said with quiet strength. "We just want peace. And we found it." But Marie wasn't done surprising the world. In 2023, she made headlines not for a new record, not for scandal, but for a choice that stunned millions. She announced that she would not leave her estimated $20 million fortune to her children. "I'm not passing on my wealth," she declared firmly. "I love my kids too much to make them weak." The backlash was instant. Critics called her cold. Fans were divided. Some said it was selfish. Others said it was cruel. But Marie never wavered. She had seen what happens when children are handed everything without earning it. How entitlement can crush purpose, kill ambition, and strip meaning from life itself. To her, it wasn't abandonment. It was love, a love expressed in the hardest way possible. She wasn't giving them money. She was giving them strength, the same kind forged in her by years of suffering, resilience, and survival. "I want my children to create their own worth," she explained, "because no one understands the value of struggle better than someone who has lived through it." It was a decision that shocked the world. But for Marie, it was the only way to ensure her children would not be defined by her shadow, her fame, or her fortune. Instead, they would be defined by their own fire. After everything, the fame, the forced childhood, the endless pressure, the heartbreak of failed marriages, the battle with depression, and the unbearable loss of her son, what remained of Marie Osmond was not a broken woman, but a soul tempered like steel in fire. She still steps onto stages, but not for the glory of charts or critics. She sings because music is her heartbeat, the thread that has carried her through every storm. She still gives interviews, not to chase headlines, but in hopes that her story might help someone else survive one more night of darkness. And in the quiet of her Utah home, she keeps one ritual alive. She lights a candle for Michael. She sings his favorite songs, not for an audience, but for the silence that now binds them. These private moments are not performances. They are acts of remembrance, threads that keep his presence alive. "Some days," she confessed, "grief tightens around me like a fist, but I get up. I pray. I laugh with my grandchildren. I sing, even through the cracks in my voice. I don't pretend the pain is gone. I just refuse to let it steal my light." Her life is no longer about perfection. It is about presence. The lines on her face, she once said, are roads she has traveled. And every road, every scar, every tear has led her to a kind of beauty deeper than youth resilience. Marie Osmond's greatest gift is not her voice. Though it defined a generation, it is not her fortune. Though it stunned the world when she chose not to pass it down, her greatest gift is her choice to survive when it would have been easier to disappear, to speak when silence was safer, to choose love over bitterness. Again and again, she has buried a child, outlived siblings, endured betrayal, survived fame and shame, and still, she smiles not the polished smile of a teenage idol, but the knowing smile of a woman who has lost everything and still dares to live fully. That is her legacy. Not perfection, not applause, but endurance, a fire that refused to go out. Even when the world tried to smother it, through every song she still dares to sing. Someone grieving feels less alone. Through every truth she shares, someone finds their own voice. And through her survival, countless hearts are reminded even stars break. But the light they give can guide others through the dark. Marie Osmond's story does not end with applause. It ends with something stronger love that changed shape but never left, and a fire within her that no tragedy could extinguish.